awareness of France's military role in the region has come under question, this as jihadist attacks have been on the rise.
What I expect from everyone is a sense of responsibility and the truth. France is not there with imperial intentions. It does not have an economic agenda in this respect, as I sometimes hear. Our subject is security. Our subject is first and foremost one of preserving the stability and sovereignty of African states that are attacked by these terrorist groups.
France has more than 4,000 soldiers in the Sahel region in its counter-terrorism task force, Operation Barkhane. French forces and their African allies this month neutralized at least 25 jihadists in separate assaults in Mali and Burkina Faso. French officials have expressed frustration as some countries in the region have not done more to curb criticism of French operations.
I openly tell you that if this political clarity is not established, France in certain countries will draw all the consequences, because I will not allow myself to be attacked. I will not allow our soldiers to be attacked with this type of argument.
France and the EU are major funders in the G5 Sahel military alliance aimed at combating terrorism. The leaders of the G5, comprising Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mauritania and Chad, are due to attend a summit in France on January 13th. They will seek ways to clarify the political and strategic framework of anti-terrorism operations. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Thousands of well-wishers turned out on Saturday to welcome former Central African Republic President Francois Bozize on his return from exile. Bozize was ousted in a 2013 coup, made his first public appearance nearly a week after returning to the country. His lawyers and supporters had long campaigned for the government to allow him to return. The former leader faces an international arrest warrant for crimes against humanity and incitement to genocide. He's accused of supporting Christian militias during the civil war 6 years ago. On 2014, he was placed on a UN sanctions list for committing or supporting acts that undermined peace and stability. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Somalia hit by the worst desert locust invasion in 25 years. And the Egyptian government seeks to do away with popular tuk-tuks.
Years of conflict and an Ebola outbreak left Africa's oldest independent republic devastated. Liberia is now trying to rebuild amid numerous challenges.
From industry, health, and even culture.
It's a story of resilience and hope. Join me, Susan Mongeli, as we take a look at how Liberians are charting a new path, only on CGTN.
Let's go to Somalia now, where locusts have been causing large-scale agricultural and environmental damage. It's been affecting the Puntland, Somaliland and Galmudug regions. Experts say it is the worst invasion in 25 years. CGTN's Daniela Pearson reports.
Farmers in Somalia are facing a new threat to their crops, the desert locust. It's already destroyed hundreds of thousands of hectares of farmland and rangeland, and the swarms are spreading.
Locusts finished the whole area, came to our farms and are eating our plants, as you can see. Once they're done, we won't have anything to feed our children, and we aren't even able to buy anything from the markets.
The locusts have eaten all the grass-covered areas and we are fighting to save our farm. We planted watermelons and beans, but we are not able to protect them. We're calling for the Somali government and the international community to come and help us.
The UN Food and Agriculture Organization says the invasion is far more serious than originally predicted. Locust eggs have been hatching profusely due to the unseasonably heavy rainfall and floods across East Africa.
It's more serious now than before. The locust normally crosses from Yemen into Somalia along the line of Puntland now where it is and Somaliland, coastal area. Then from there when it lands, it starts now breeding and then it continues to ravage whatever, either planting, crops, or even pasture.
The desert locust has also been threatening food supplies in neighboring Ethiopia. If left unchecked, the FAO says new swarms could even reach northern Kenya. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
And in South Africa, where a disturbing marine environmental issue seems to be taking place, one which has resulted in a high number of mortalities of highly endangered African penguins. Experts say overfishing off the Western Cape Coast has resulted in a severe food deficiency for not only indigenous penguin colonies, but apex ocean predators as well. And the net result of this is the hunter has become the hunted. Here's CGTN's Travis Andrews with more.
African penguin numbers have dropped significantly over the years. So much so that a population of 2 million in the 1930s was reduced by over 98%, leaving just under 42,000 alive today. The situation, though, shows no signs of abating, and overfishing has become a real killer, with seabirds now having to increasingly risk life and limb for a meal.
It is a critical point because those islands where you'll find penguins like Stony Point and Robben Island and Simonstown, they are the critical places where you would find penguins. If there isn't any fish along that coast, that pushes the penguin to go further along our coastline where they shouldn't really be. So they end up in, like I said, they end up in predatory waters, but ending up in predatory waters could also mean that they get eaten by other predators. At the same time, they also might be looking for fish along that coast.
That means predators such as sharks, orcas and seals have made a meal of critically endangered penguins as they grapple with their own food shortage. This all points to human agency. Overfishing, pollution and harvesting of eggs have all piled pressure on the species, and their entry into uncharted waters could plunge the numbers into the abyss.
If there isn't fish for other predators and there isn't fish for penguins and there isn't fish for us, those birds end up dying from starvation, which means there won't be any penguins around our coast at all. So an estimated time of 10 to 15 years, maybe even within 7 years, we might not see penguins.
Marine conservationists, though, have used activism and education to highlight the plight of these seabirds, which are one of the iconic South African species. Now, the government has been proactive in trying to arrest the situation, including introducing more marine protected areas and trying to better manage fishing quota allocations.
We're actually very fortunate that a number of our coastlines are registered and actually proclaimed as marine protected areas, but we just need more people in order to enforce that kind of legislation. And especially along the coastline is vitally important because the coastline is where a lot of the fish actually breed and actually recover their numbers as well.
And the 22 new marine protected areas are meant to recover fish stocks, so that all species such as predators and penguins can live healthily and thrive with sustainability. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where inadequate public transportation has been a long-standing issue for the residents of the capital, Kinshasa. And efforts by the government to introduce more buses have not been able to keep up with the demand. But as CGTN's Chris Ochamringa tells us, the city's yellow taxis are increasingly useful in getting people around the town.
Traveling around Kinshasa during rush hour is a struggle for most city residents. The population of the country's capital is estimated at around 12 million people, according to the UN. And with public transport struggling to meet people's needs, many rely on these yellow taxis to get to their destinations. But they aren't enough to go around.
We need more buses in Kinshasa to solve our transport problems. The government will also collect more money from the taxes the car owners will pay.
Some of the public minibuses are also in very poor shape. In 2016, the government introduced new buses to improve the transport problem, but the problem still persists.
We have very many cars in this city, but very few roads. There are people who would like to buy new cars, but they'll have nowhere to drive them.
Congolese authorities now collect more revenue from the motorists.
All these taxis are required to pay fees to the government. If they are found without documents, they won't be allowed to operate.
The DRC, like many African countries, is grappling with a rapidly growing population, which hasn't been matched with infrastructure. And so it's common to see people crammed in taxis heading back home.
The yellow taxis, or ketch as they are known here, have brought some relief for Kinshasa residents traveling around town. But the construction of flyovers around the city has made traveling a nightmare for many residents seeking to get back home early during rush hour. Chris Chamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Meanwhile, in Egypt, in an attempt to modernize and improve the appearance of the country, the government is moving to replace tuk-tuks with minivans. But it is a move that could devastate an off-the-grid economy. Yasser Hakim brings us the details.
Khalid Esmat works 8 hours every day on his tuk-tuk in Cairo. He transports the poor people in this neighborhood. Khalid is one of many who are forced to give up their small three-wheeled vehicle.
I don't mind the new regulations, but what's more important for me is to be allowed to be licensed. I'm ready to pay the tax, insurance and license fees. That's better than confiscating it, because this is our livelihood.
At 10 cents a ride, the tuk-tuks are convenient for majority low-income earners. However, they have been a source of chaos in Egyptian streets.
They have been the source of widespread crime. Murders, looting and harassment have increased using tuk-tuks. They've also filled streets, bridges and roads where they're not supposed to be. They were made for the small villages and tiny streets only. But now they are everywhere, and that's why the government decided to ban them.
The government believes the minivans would be easier to control. It's also environmentally friendly, using natural gas rather than fuel. According to the new law, tuk-tuk owners are required to sell it for scrap and are given long-term, low-interest rate loans to purchase taxi minivans instead. The procedures have already begun.
The process of replacing the tuk-tuks with minivans could cost the state more than $22 billion and will take 3 years according to the announced plans. It might face some resistance from drivers at the beginning, but I believe it will prove a success.
There are 3 million tuk-tuks roaming the streets. Only 99,000 are licensed. The licensed ones will be allowed to continue, but only in small villages and roads not accessible by cars. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Let's get more on this development. I'm now joined by Ayat El-Tawi, a Cairo-based journalist specialized in covering politics and social affairs in Egypt. Ayat, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Let's start off with the concern over the unemployment that this could cause for the tuk-tuk drivers. So with so many tuk-tuks in Cairo, thousands of drivers now are at risk of losing their livelihoods. What's going to happen?
Well, the government has come up with a plan to replace the polluting three-wheeled tuk-tuks with clean-running vans. As you may know, and as everyone knows, the tuk-tuks have long ruled the streets of Cairo and have become a main means of transportation for millions of Egyptians, especially in small alleys and rural villages. The government says that tuk-tuks have largely contributed to congestion, air pollution, fatal crashes, and even terrorism, because the government cannot trace unlicensed vehicles. But many fear that the plan will actually further squeeze the poorest Egyptians who have long suffered from tough economic reforms that have dramatically spiked up prices and slashed subsidies. The new plan requires drivers to sell their tuk-tuks for scraps and to take loans to buy the gas-powered vehicles. The government offers them payoff periods of up to 5 years, but the problem is many drivers fear that they will not be able to afford to buy the new vans, especially that a new licensed tuk-tuk is sold for £40,000, while the cheapest minivan can be sold for around 120,000 Egyptian pounds. And tuk-tuk drivers make an average of $8–9 a day. So it's going to actually be a big problem for them to afford to buy the new vans.
So it's going to be a big problem for them, Ayat, to afford the vans, and the government is asking them to take loans to buy the minivans. What incentive, though, is the government giving on its part to try and meet the deficit if the drivers are unable to take the loans?
Sorry, I can't hear the question well.
I just want to repeat this to you, that you have said that the
Can
government...
you repeat the question?
Yes, the government has asked the drivers to take loans to buy the minivans. What incentive is the government giving to the drivers to enable them buy the minivans?
Well, the government is still like making an economic review to hammer out the details of the plan, and they expect the new vans to hit the streets within the next year. And actually, the problem is the government has long turned a blind eye to the booming business, and until the tuk-tuks became like a main part of the country's informal settlement. And the business has exploded, and it has become a main source of livelihood for many poor Egyptians, especially the elderly, women, teenagers who provide for their families. And the government has more focused on mega projects rather than developing the infrastructure where people live.
Right, so the government says that one of the reasons it is phasing out the tuk-tuks is to deal with the growing crime. Now, given that many are not licensed, but let me ask, as one driver also said, why are all motorists being punished for the mistake or the actions of others? Because not all the tuk-tuk drivers may have been involved in crime.
Yeah, problem is the government has taken a sort of contradictory approach towards the matter, like banning the tuk-tuks from main streets or in affluent neighborhoods, while allowing auto manufacturers to legally assemble and sell them, the unlicensed vehicles. And actually, it has also allowed the flow of tuk-tuk parts from South Asia. So it is sort of legal and illegal at the same time. So I think that it is mainly because of the deeply rooted informality and the government's failure to deal with the matter properly since the beginning. Even under the former President Hosni Mubarak, the government allowed the unlicensed vehicles to operate in small alleys and rural villages, and they were not allowed to operate in main streets, while again auto manufacturers were allowed to assemble and sell them. So it was sort of legal and illegal at the same time.
All right, Ayat El Tawi joining us there from Cairo with that development on Egypt minivans. Thank you. You're watching Africa Live. We'll be right back after the short break. Stay with us.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Tunisia has inaugurated a photovoltaic plant. It has a 40 high voltage kilowatts peak capacity and is aimed to ensure the self-generation of the country's electricity needs. The installation will see to the production of solar energy using an off-grid operational configuration that will also help to reduce gas consumption while saving over 6,500 tons of CO2 emissions per year. This new facility is part of the implementation of the state's policy and the National Development Plan. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi filed this report from Tunis.
Tunisia's National Development Plan is designed to control energy consumption by means of increasing the share of renewable energies in the energy mix and promoting energy efficiency and energy savings.
The state strongly believes in the successful partnership between the public and private investors in the renewable energy sector. All the new facilities will produce energy, contribute to energy transition and security, while reducing Tunisia's energy deficit, which reached 52% in 2018.
Tunisia's Ministry of Energy, Mines and Renewable Energy has received 5 bids for a 500 megawatt solar tender. It launched in November. This project is part of the Tunisian energy plan aimed to generate 30% of electricity from renewable energy.
Our target is to produce 500 megawatts of electricity from solar power with a total investment of $400 million. It represents 1% of the national economy. The project will kick off in a month's time and last for 2 years. We will accompany private energy producers until they are fully autonomous to sell and distribute electricity.
Renewable energy experts have welcomed the recent entry into operation of the Tozerwan photovoltaic power plant in the desert south of the country with a capacity of 10 megawatts.
The project will be extended with the Toza 2 10 MW photovoltaic power plant, which is scheduled to come into operation in the first quarter of 2020. The 2 plants will meet the needs of 18,000 consumers, that is a third of the needs of inhabitants in Toza.
According to the National Institute of Statistics, Tunisia meets around 97% of its electricity needs from gas and oil. The energy subsidy represents a considerable burden on the budget. Experts assert that despite the excellent geographical conditions in Tunisia, installed photovoltaic capacity stands at just 35 megawatts. More private and public investment is necessary to increase the proportion of photovoltaic systems in the North African state. Adnan Chauchi, CGTN, Tunis.
Cameroon-born Alain Wanja has a company that manufactures the best quality recycling machinery in South Africa. Based in Johannesburg, the company called Ruby Dust Trading makes a range of balers. They used to compress recyclable and waste materials into small, manageable bales. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
Balers are used in many other industries outside recycling facilities. These include manufacturing plants, retail outlets, schools, and many other businesses. And in a world where recycling has become so key, these machines can probably be best described as revolutionary. The machines ensure that the recycling process is seamless.
So let's say a 1 liter container is this big, but the baler will make it this small. So now you can be able to move like 20 tons in a truck that you were supposed to move like 500 kilos. So that's exactly what a baler does. So it's like the people who recycle materials, they always want it baled. So we create the machines that will bale the material before they can be able to use it to crush and melt and wash and do whatever thing they want to do with.
Wanja prides himself in being a pioneer of these machines on the African continent.
I'm proud to say I'm the first African black person to produce these machines in Africa. I came up with the whole concept myself. I did 13 machines single-handed. I didn't have someone to talk to, I didn't have someone to help and stuff like that. So I do the welding, the cutting, the designing, the hydraulics, the spray painting, like everything from scratch, deliver it, train the people myself.
This entrepreneur is delighted that his business is growing faster than he had originally imagined.
I came up with this concept. I've sold machines to Nigeria, Zambia, Tanzania, Uganda, South Africa. So that's to tell you that Africa is really getting into recycling. And that's the best part of my life that I can tell you that I've done to the world, and I'm happy with that.
The company is focused on creating jobs and saving our earth by making it a cleaner place through recycling.
Before saving the recyclers, I'm saving the earth, and I'm trying to see how I can clean our communities. And with the machineries that I'm supplying to people who are doing recycling.
Yuri Sandra Mela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A teenager from northern Nigeria is using his passion to solve the problem of electricity in his local neighborhood. Those speech and hearing deficient, he produces electricity from condemned appliances. CGTN's Kelechi Ebekalam brings us the story of how he's doing this.
Weak batteries from microphones and parts from broken electronics. For many, that is trash. But it's treasure for 16-year-old MS. He gathers them together and builds a system to help light up his local community. They're totally cut off from the national grid. MS Innovation started just before he turned 11 years old.
I feel happy. I want to produce two lives.
He had a passion of creating things on his own. In that environment that we were having no electricity, so he saw that there was a need for him to make electricity for himself and for our family. And I can see the motivation there.
Life started out quite challenging for this self-taught innovator. 3 months after his birth, he was diagnosed with calcium deficiency and lived all his infant life in and out of hospital. When he eventually started walking, he lost his ability to hear and couldn't speak like other children.
Even from the infancy, that some people were saying he wasn't a human being. Even when we were taking care of him, he was a kid. And even my uncle they were planning to come and pick him and throw him away from home, because they were saying that we were suffering with somebody who is not a human being.
MS is now a beacon of hope to his family and community. He wants to become an electrical engineer in future to contribute his own quota to light up the entire nation. And that dream is becoming a reality with his many awards and scholarships. Kelechi Ebekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
China has expressed serious concerns about parts of the U.S. defense bill that addresses Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang and Tibet. A spokesperson for the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National People's Congress said the clauses ignore facts and are full of bias. He also condemned America for meddling in China's internal affairs. The spokesman urged the U.S. to abandon its Cold War mentality. The leaders of the two countries earlier held a phone call on Friday about the state of ongoing trade talks. Last week, the two sides managed to wrap up what they called Phase 1 of an agreement, but there's lots more work to be done. CGTN's Xing Rian has more.
Chinese President Xi Jinping hailed the progress the two sides were making on the phone call, saying their efforts would ultimately benefit both countries and the world. He also noted how it was all carried out on the basis of equality and mutual respect, something Beijing insists must be part of any deal. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said the two sides were ready to move on to the next crucial stage of negotiations.
We have a clear position on the U.S.-China trade issue. The two sides have recently reached a consensus on the text of the Phase 1 deal. Now the two sides are proceeding with follow-up work. I think you all have noted the statements from both sides. As we said before, to reach a Phase 1 deal serves the interests of China, the U.S., and the world, and lives up to the expectations of the international community.
The U.S. president seemed just as keen on the phone call, saying he wanted to get Phase 1 signed and sealed as soon as possible. It's hoped Phase 1 will be the start of a rollback of tariffs following a 21-month standoff. The U.S. agreed to cancel some of its existing tariffs on Chinese goods, whilst China agreed to purchase more American agricultural products, amongst others. So what comes next? The agreement was met with relief by investors and shoppers in the U.S., and it couldn't hardly have come at a better time for Trump. The U.S. president is being impeached at home, whilst he's also facing into a grueling re-election campaign in 2020. He said he didn't know what Phase 2 would bring, but the existing 25% tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese imports would stay in place for now. Meanwhile, the Chinese president also raised concern over what he called negative U.S. actions over events in the Chinese territories of Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Tibet. Xi stressed that Washington should stay out of Beijing's internal affairs. Despite this, Trump said he was looking forward to maintaining communication in the near future. Whether the sides can build further on the recent momentum, at least regarding trade, remains to be seen. Sirinan, CGTN.
And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's ahead. One of Africa's biggest art collectors shows us his prized art pieces at his home in Lagos, Nigeria.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
One of Africa's biggest art collectors has given CGTN access to his collection at his home in Lagos. Nigerian Yemisi Shylon has over 7,000 pieces of art, ranging from traditional, neo-traditional African art to contemporary paintings and sculptures. CGTN's Deji Badmus has that story.
He's popularly called the crazy art collector. Looking around his expansive compound, it's clear to see why. The artworks here are indisputably a collection of some of the masterpieces on the African continent. And if you think of any great artist to come out of Nigeria, you'll find their work here. Each of the pieces tells a deep-rooted traditional story that reflects the richness of African social-cultural heritage. Yemisi Shylon is ranked among the world's top 100 art collectors, whose vast collection includes over 7,000 artworks. He started collecting art pieces 40 years ago as a second-year student in one of the country's most prestigious higher institutions. Over time, it has now become an obsession.
I've collected works from
many countries in the world. When I go on cruises, I go on travels, I've visited many, many countries in the world. I've collected works from many, I even Salvador Dali and so on and so forth. These are all life-size bronze works, metal works, and you don't find many of it in Africa, not just of Nigeria.
In 2007, Yemisi Shilon established his art foundation, and in October this year, he opened the Yemisi Shilon Museum of Art at the Pan-Atlantic University in Lagos, southwest Nigeria. The state-of-the-art facility houses modern paintings and sculptures, as well as photographs of ancient cultural festivals.
I have helped different scholars from different universities in the world to come and study Nigerian art. Many of them came for their PhD research. I've helped different Nigerian artists and international artists to on art residency workshops here. I've organized seminars. I've done many, many things, all with a view to making a difference and leaving a lasting legacy. It gives me satisfaction that I am now establishing the first modern art museum for Nigeria, and the first of its type, I'm told, in sub-Saharan Africa.
Shilon is a selfless promoter of Nigerian art who has donated many of his pieces to public places and institutions across the country. He purchased all of these art pieces with proceeds from his personal investment and has also published 2 books on the collection. He says the historical value of this for him far outweighs the economic gains.
I don't make money from art. I don't sell art. Art is not about monetary value, but what role does it play to promote the culture and the contribution of any society to civilization, to global civilization. And that's the purpose of my collecting art. And also to promote historical content of our society.
Nigeria made around $5 million from the sale of art in 2018. And as more people continue to develop interest for art through the immense contributions of collectors like Yemisi Shilon, there's no limit to how much more the country can realize from art promotion. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And Tunisia has kicked off its annual puppetry celebration. This second edition is currently underway at the Culture City in the capital, Tunis. Over 8 days, puppet lovers can enjoy international performances, take part in creative workshops, and watch giant puppets roam the streets.
This is the first participation of Hop Signor Puppet Theatre from Greece to Carthage Days of Puppetry Arts. Tabula Rosa is the story of a tiny character. A writer, absorbed in his work, keeps shrinking in his room.
It's a performance about the difficulties that someone has to create. So the writer is shrinking in order to create something. And in the end of the performance, he meets his muse, his inspiration. So it's, let's say, a simple story with string puppets.
It's the holiday season in Tunisia. Children have come from many regions to enjoy the international performances that tell universal stories on human values.
I have learned so much from the character, like the importance of reading and writing, and the sacrifice of writers to publish books for children.
Ayub is a young visitor who's discovering the art of puppetry. He's watched live performances and attended workshops to learn how to create, personalize, and manipulate puppets.
This event is fantastic. I've learned so much at Culture City. I've written my own scenario and tried to manipulate different puppets. This art nurtures the imagination.
The art of puppetry was neglected in the past, but now we're witnessing a revival of this art, as children and youth are learning the techniques of making puppets.
Dozens of Tunisian and African puppets are exhibited at the main hall of the City of Culture. The installation recreates the history of this artistic discipline in the region. The puppetry art is rooted in Tunisia's cultural identity. The Carthage Days of Puppetry Art is the best event through which this art is being promoted as one of the most appropriate forms of expression and communication for children and adult audiences. Adin Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. CGTN talks to South Africa's Brad Binder, who is set to join the elite MotoGP circuit in 2020.
How would you create your legend? On the fields,